perhaps the fact that there was a box sitting by the front door of her books might be a clue, but it wasn't. So I have the box that was sitting by the front door of her books, for those of you who would like them. And I should have mentioned that during the announcements, and I didn't think of it. So there, it's right over here, if you want to see butterfly soup. And she's so funny. She says, I saw what your topic was. Did you plan that? No. Remember these guys?
Yes.
I lived, when I was growing up, tiny. Right. 4 to 14, I lived in a 3rd floor walk-up apartment. We had 7 flights of stairs. And I kept trying to get it to go around the corner and see how many flights I could get it to. That was fun, right? So this is what we call resilience, right? You can stretch it, you can change its shape, and it'll come back into it. Who wants to play catch? All right, squish it. It's a squishy ball. All right? It comes back into shape. It is resilient. You're welcome to throw it around the room. All right, and it comes back. That's the essence of this topic, is that things happen and you come back. But what's interesting is, even though it looks and feels the same, it's never quite the same when it comes back. And neither are we. So, I'm going to be stepping up and down a little bit here. Unless, are you guys okay if this is up here? Will that mess up anybody? Good. So, when I was studying resilience, it was from the world of the sciences, and nobody else was really talking about it. But in the last 10, 20 years, everyone else is now talking about it. So it's the capacity to return to an original or higher state. And in ecology, we're looking at what Wendell Berry was talking about. When we are not doing our greed thing in a natural environment, it returns to its original or higher state. In business, it has to do with continuing to make a profit, regardless of the nasty things that happen to you. And in psychology, there's a whole lot of work on resilience right now, having to do with coming back from a trauma. And that's then expanded into the larger social systems field. So when, I was given this topic actually in another UU church I work with in Coos Bay, and they're using a UU program where they do a topic each month. And so this topic this month in Coos Bay is resilience. And then, they're going to be doing a series on this topic. And I'm going, why is the UUA interested in resilience out of my science? And then as I'm picking up what's happened over the last 10 years or so, I see what it is. Because a huge amount of what being a Unitarian in our world is facilitating the response to the distress that we're experiencing. And living with that distress and moving through it and beyond. There's one thing to live in a culture without ever thinking and just putting up with what's happening. It's a whole other thing to live in a culture and think about it. And you all think about it, and sometimes that hurts. It's really hard to think about a lot of the things that are going on in the world without having some pain involved. And so I'd like to explore how we can be a little more resilient in the face of the distress. Some of you have seen this diagram in some of my workshops. This comes out of an ecologist's work actually in Maine and Vermont, those of you who are from New England, with the spruce budworm when it was going through and devastating the forests. And what he found was, you've got a seed down there in the lower, that side, and that seed is, it's growing inside the seed initially as it gets in the right conditions. It starts shifting and changing, and then it sprouts open, and it emerges into the environment, and then it's interacting with the environment, and there's more and more sharing and interaction and outer growth with the environment, and then as that continues, there's more and more structure imposed. So we've got, on a tree, we've got more bark, we've got, branches that are, supporting each other in some cases, and a balance between the upper structure and the root structure, and there's more and more structure. Well, all this time, there's inputs from the environment. There's changes in water and temperature and climate and fires and people and animals and all of that stuff, and it's doing fine until there's a point where the structure is so firmly in place that any little change breaks it apart. Right? Where there's more structure than life is another way to think about it. Well, needless to say, those of us who do organizational development recognize this pattern. Right? We've seen this where there is structure and too much structure, and then it can't handle any shift in the environment. And we've seen it in the political systems too. Well, what happens up there in the corner, the critical event, could be just a normal thing, but it happens at the right moment where the whole thing starts to fall apart, and it looks chaotic, and it's scary, and it's awful. And it will last in that chaotic state as long as people are holding on to the old structure. The minute they can start looking for the seed that is ready to come out of this process, the chaos begins to die down. And then a whole new cycle begins. So the number one key is not to be attached to what was, and to discover what is and what is emerging when we're dealing with this stuff. So the official term is panarchy. I think that's fun, panarchy. Everything rules everything. So what happens to whatever system, every kind of living system, from a cell through a nation, is it's going along up and down, and then that critical fluctuation happens, and it either takes off and thrives, or it falls apart. And that's what we are experiencing in every aspect of our life right now. In the economic, in the education, in the political, in every aspect of life. In this world, we are. In relationship, in self-definition, we are right at that stop. And we get to choose. Am I going to stay attached to what was? Or am I going to allow the seed of what is trying to happen here to sprout and thrive? When I came into resilience from the world of systems, I was studying cybernetics and systems theory for a number of years and teaching it. And when we look at a system and say that's resilient, the first thing we're looking for is, are there redundancies in the system? Those of you who have watched movies or who are in the military are very comfortable with fail-safe as a concept. A fail-safe is, it starts to fail, you put some other system in place, and now you're safe. Okay? There's a flip of that, that's the safe fail. That is, the thing has failed completely, now you have something else you have to do to be safe. And so you want fail-safes and safe fails, and that means you've got things that can cover for each other, and you've got a people in place who can pick up and run with it. I'm thinking of that pilot in the Hudson River, remember? If he hadn't been a glider pilot, that would have been a failure, but it was a safe fail because he was a glider pilot, and he could treat that plane as a glider. I understand Tom Hanks did that role in a movie. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's quite good. So if you have enough backup systems, enough alternatives in place, you've got redundancy. Okay? Our bodies are like that. Our bodies have so many backups for so many backups. Our brains, a part of the brain doesn't function. Okay, I'll pick it up over here. Oh, really? Can't do that? We'll do that, The brain has it. The various parts of the body have it. There are a few glands that don't, and that's why we have replacements for those glands. All right, diversity. Some of that safe fail comes through, you've got things that are a little different in place. Again, we had a pilot who was also a glider pilot, If you have a variety of different angles and skills and possibilities on board, all kinds of things can be taken care of.